At my 6-year wedding anniversary dinner, my husband raised his glass, toasting to being free, single, and searching. While I was still in shock, he handed me a t-shirt with 6 years of disappointment printed on it. His mother raised her glass, his dad smirked. I stood up, took a breath, and made an announcement that left everyone in the restaurant frozen. To being free, single, and searching. The champagne in my glass sloshed as Jake slammed his flute against it. I stared at my husband of 6 years, my body turning to stone as he proclaimed his freedom to the entire restaurant. My anniversary dinner. My public execution. Jake reached under the table and pulled out a gift box with theatrical flair. His mother Barbara's eyes sparkled with cruel anticipation while his father's face twisted into the smirk I'd grown to despise. "Open it, honey," Jake urged, his voice dripping with false sweetness. I had it specially made. My trembling fingers lifted the lid, revealing a folded black t-shirt. As I unfolded it, bold white letters proclaimed, 6 years of disappointment. The restaurant seemed to tilt around me as realization crashed through my body like ice water. This moment, this public humiliation had been the plan all along. Looking back, I should have seen it coming. The cracks in our marriage hadn't appeared overnight, though I'd become adept at ignoring them. Jake had grown increasingly distant over the past year, his late nights at the office multiplying without explanation. Our conversations had dwindled to logistical exchanges about bills and schedules. The spark that had once drawn us together had faded to cold embers. Working late again? I'd asked 3 months earlier, watching him adjust his tie in our bedroom mirror. "Big client," he'd mumbled without meeting my eyes. "Don't wait up." I'd noticed the cologne then, not his usual scent but something new. When he returned past midnight, he'd shower before coming to bed, claiming the office was stuffy. I accepted the explanation because the alternative meant acknowledging our marriage was failing. Our intimacy had evaporated. Jake's touches became perfunctory, his kisses quick pecks lacking any real affection. When I initiated, he'd claim exhaustion or stress, rolling away to scroll through his phone with his back to me. The rejection stung, but I buried it beneath excuses about work pressure and bad timing. On Sundays, when we used to spend lazy mornings making breakfast together, Jake started scheduling golf with his father or networking brunches I wasn't invited to attend. The house grew silent in his absence, and I found myself talking aloud just to hear a human voice. "We should plan something special for our anniversary," I'd suggested 6 weeks earlier, attempting to rekindle something between us. "Sure," he'd agreed with surprising enthusiasm. "I'll handle everything. It'll be memorable." The genuine smile that crossed his face should have warned me. Instead, I felt hopeful for the first time in months, believing he wanted to repair what was broken between us. I discovered the truth while doing laundry. Jake usually emptied his pockets, but that day a crumpled receipt fell out when I tossed his pants into the washing machine. I almost threw it away without looking, but something made me smooth it open. It was from a custom t-shirt shop downtown, dated 3 weeks earlier. The description line read, "Black tee, white print. 6 years of disappointment." My stomach clenched as I read it again, not quite processing what it meant. A joke for a friend? A gag gift for someone else? The date on the receipt aligned with the day Jake claimed to have worked late. I felt the foundation of my world shift beneath my feet. Sitting on the laundry room floor surrounded by dirty clothes, I realized my husband was planning to humiliate me on our anniversary. The thought seemed too cruel to be real, yet the evidence sat in my hand, impossible to misinterpret. That night, I studied Jake across the dinner table, wondering how the man I'd pledged my life to could become this stranger planning my public shame. I searched for hints of the person I'd fallen in love with, but his eyes remained distant, occasionally checking his phone hidden beneath the table. "Everything okay?" he asked, noticing my stare. "Perfect," I lied, matching his false smile with one of my own. The next revelation came from an unexpected source. I'd begun frequenting a small cafe near my office, seeking solace in neutral territory away from our increasingly tense home. Megan, a waitress there, gradually became familiar with my order and my face. "Rough day?" she asked one afternoon, setting down my latte. "Rough year," I admitted, surprising myself with the honesty. Something in my tone must have resonated with her, because she hesitated before asking, "Your last name wouldn't happen to be Collins, would it?" The question startled me. "It is." "Why?" Megan lowered her voice. I also work weekends at Vincenzo's. Your in-laws are regulars. She paused, seeming to weigh her words. I've overheard conversations about you that didn't seem kind. My heart pounded as she explained how she'd served Jake, his parents, and occasionally another woman for dinner many Sundays. The same Sundays he claimed to be golfing or networking. They discussed an anniversary surprise with malicious excitement, specifying it would happen at Vincenzo's, the upscale Italian restaurant his mother adored. I'm not supposed to get involved in customers' business, Megan said, but it sounded cruel. I'd want someone to tell me. I thanked her with tears threatening to spill. As she turned to leave, I asked, the woman with them, can you describe her? Blonde, mid-30s. Designer clothes. She's never there when your husband is, only with your in-laws. Megan hesitated. They call her Diane. Diane. My mother-in-law's personal assistant. The pieces began aligning in a horrifying picture. Instead of confronting Jake, I decided to investigate. Something inside me had hardened, a protective shell forming around the wounded parts of my heart. I deserved to know the full extent of his betrayal before deciding my next steps. I began by checking our credit card statements, finding regular charges at hotels on nights Jake claimed to work late. There were jewelry purchases I'd never received and dinners at restaurants I'd never visited. The paper trail of deceit stretched back further than I'd imagined. One afternoon while Jake was at work, I searched his home office. Hidden in the back of his desk drawer, I found a burner phone containing hundreds of text messages between him and someone saved simply as D. The exchanges were intimate and detailed, including plans for their future together, once the anniversary was handled. They discussed me in clinical terms like a problem to be solved. Jake complained about my cooking, my appearance, even my devotion to him, twisting my loyalty into something pathetic. Reading their conversation felt like being stabbed repeatedly, each message another wound to my already bleeding heart. But beneath the pain, anger sparked. Who was he to judge me? Who were they to plan my humiliation as entertainment? I photographed everything, documenting each betrayal meticulously. Whatever happened next, I wouldn't face it unarmed. Do you have any questions about the process? The divorce attorney asked, sliding a folder of paperwork across her desk. I'd made the appointment impulsively after discovering the burner phone, needing to understand my options. Attorney Sarah Reeves had come recommended as someone who handled high-conflict divorces with discretion. What about financial protection? I asked, thinking of our joint accounts. If I wanted to secure assets before filing? Legally, you're entitled to your fair share, she explained. I'd recommend documenting everything now and moving your portion to separate accounts before any confrontation occurs. It's not hiding assets, it's protecting what's rightfully yours. The meeting lasted an hour, during which I outlined the evidence I'd gathered. Sarah listened without judgment, taking careful notes. It sounds like your husband and his family are planning something particularly vindictive, she observed. Given that, I'd suggest being strategic rather than reactive. As she detailed potential approaches, something settled inside me, a cold, clear determination replacing the chaotic hurt. This wasn't just about ending a marriage. It was about reclaiming my dignity from people who planned to strip it away for their amusement. When I left her office, clutching a folder of legal options, I felt different. Heartbroken, yes, but also resolute. The woman who'd entered that office had been desperate and wounded. The one who walked out was beginning to sketch the outline of a counterattack. Jake had no idea what was coming. Neither did I, not yet, but I knew with absolute certainty that his toast to freedom would not go as planned. My newfound determination pushed me forward like a woman possessed. With legal advice fresh in my mind, I decided to follow the money before Jake suspected anything. Our checking account showed normal activity, but when I dug deeper into our joint investment portfolio, alarm bells started ringing. Over the past 3 months, Jake had systematically transferred small amounts, not enough to trigger notifications but substantial in total, to a separate account I had no access to. That's odd, I whispered to myself, scrolling through the transaction history. A pattern emerged. $2,000 here, $1,500 there, always just below the notification threshold we'd set up. The transfers began exactly 4 months ago, right around the time Jake's behavior had shifted from merely distant to actively secretive. I called our financial advisor, pretending everything was normal. Mark, Quick question about those recent transfers from our joint portfolio. The ones to Jake's personal account? He mentioned you were saving for a big anniversary surprise. Mark sounded genuinely pleased for us. Didn't want to spoil it by sending statements to your shared email. A chill spread through me. Of course. Just double-checking the numbers. How much has been moved in total? The figure he quoted made my knees buckle. Nearly $80,000. Almost half our liquid savings had been systematically siphoned away. The anniversary surprise wasn't just a humiliating t-shirt. Jake was preparing to leave me financially vulnerable too. I thanked Mark casually and hung up before anger could seep into my voice. That same afternoon, I opened a separate account at a different bank and transferred my personal savings, money I'd inherited from my grandmother, out of our shared account. It wasn't much compared to what Jake had taken, but it gave me breathing room. The search for financial documents led me to the attic, a space I rarely entered. Jake had insisted on storing our important papers there in a filing cabinet he'd inherited from his father. The cabinet itself was a hulking metal monster, covered in a layer of dust that suggested Jake hadn't accessed it recently either. I found our mortgage papers and tax returns easily enough, but the bottom drawer contained something unexpected, a cardboard box labeled simply family. Inside were photo albums and newspaper clippings dating back 2 decades. Most featured Jake's parents at various social events, testimonials to their status in our small community. But tucked at the bottom was a smaller album with a tarnished leather cover. The photos inside showed a different family than the one I knew. Barbara smiling genuinely, Richard without his perpetual scowl, Jake as a teenager with braces, and beside him in almost every shot, another boy a few years older. I flipped the album over, finding names and dates written in faded ink. Jake and Michael, summer 1998. Michael. Jake had never mentioned a brother. Digging deeper into the box, I found a newspaper clipping with the headline, "Local Student Wins Full Scholarship to Princeton." The grainy photo showed a serious young man with Jake's jawline but different eyes. Kinder somehow. The article identified him as Michael Collins, son of Richard and Barbara, graduating valedictorian. Another clipping, dated 3 years later, mentioned rising financial star Michael Collins, joining a prestigious firm in New York. Then nothing, as if he'd been erased from the family record. I sat back on my heels, dust motes dancing in the attic's dim light. 6 years of marriage and Jake had never once mentioned having a brother. What else had been hidden from me? You didn't know about Michael? Mrs. Porter's eyebrows shot up nearly to her hairline. Our neighbor was in her 70s and had lived next door to the Collins family for decades. If anyone knew their secrets, it would be her. I'd brought her a homemade pie as pretense for my questions, claiming I was putting together a family photo album for our anniversary. Jake mentioned a brother once but never elaborated. I lied smoothly. I thought it might be nice to include some childhood photos of them together. Mrs. Porter's living room smelled of lavender and old books. She set down her teacup with a clatter. Well, I'm not one to gossip, but that family did that boy wrong. Michael was the smart one. Kind too. Richard had his life all planned out. Ivy League education, then joined the family business. But Michael wanted to make his own path. According to Mrs. Porter, the final break came after Michael discovered questionable accounting in his father's business and threatened to report it unless changes were made. He was cut off completely, name never spoken again in the family home. And Jake? I prompted. Were they close? Thick as thieves growing up. But Jake always needed his parents' approval more than Michael did. She leaned forward, lowering her voice. After Michael left, Richard and Barbara focused all their attention on shaping Jake. Told him what to study, where to work, even who to date. My stomach clenched. Who to date? Mrs. Porter patted my hand sympathetically. They never thought anyone was good enough for their remaining son. When Jake brought you home, Barbara spent weeks telling everyone you were temporary. Even your wedding. Remember how they insisted on changing your colors from blue to burgundy? Barbara told my daughter it was because blue wasn't sophisticated enough for Collins family photos. I remembered the color change, how I'd given in to keep the peace. How many other decisions had been influenced by the Collins family's manipulation. They control everything in Jake's life, Mrs. Porter continued. That fancy job. Richard pulled strings. Your house. Barbara found it. I've always wondered how much of your marriage was Jake's choice and how much was their orchestration. I left Mrs. Porter's with my mind spinning. Our entire relationship suddenly felt suspect, potentially just another checkbox in a life planned by Jake's controlling parents. The final piece fell into place 3 days later. I'd been monitoring Jake's emails. His password had remained our wedding date despite my suggestion to change it regularly. Most messages were work-related, but one exchange with his mother made my blood boil. "Everything set for Saturday," Barbara had written. "Vincenzo's confirms our reservation for 7 p.m. Richard thinks the t-shirt is too much, but I disagree. That girl needs to understand she never belonged in this family." Jake's reply was brief. "T-shirt is fine. Dad will come around when he sees her face." My hands shook with rage. Not only had Barbara orchestrated my public humiliation, but she'd been the one to push for the t-shirt, and Jake had eagerly agreed. A follow-up email included a receipt from Barbara's credit card, payment for the custom shirt I'd discovered earlier, plus a reservation deposit at Vincenzo's. She'd even specified a corner table, for maximum visibility according to her note. I'd spent 6 years trying to please these people, believing their coldness was just their nature. Now I understood the truth. They had never intended to accept me. I wasn't just fighting a failing marriage. I was up against an entire family system designed to control and ultimately discard me. In that moment, the last of my tears dried up. In their place grew something harder, more resolute. If the Collins family wanted war, I would give them one. But I needed an ally. Someone who understood their tactics from the inside. I needed to find Michael Collins. Finding Michael Collins proved easier than I expected. A simple LinkedIn search revealed he worked as a financial consultant in Boston, just 3 hours from our suburb. His profile picture showed a man with Jake's jawline but gentler eyes, dressed in a crisp suit that couldn't quite hide a rebellious edge. No mention of family appeared in his biography, just academic credentials and professional accomplishments. I sent him a message that evening, deliberately vague. "My name is Emma Collins. I'm married to Jake. There are things about your family I believe we should discuss. Would you be willing to meet?" His response came the next morning, just 4 words. "Cornerstone Cafe. Sunday. Noon." The drive to Boston gave me too much time to doubt myself. What if Michael was worse than his family? What if this was a trap? By the time I pulled into the parking lot of the small cafe on the outskirts of the city, my hands were trembling. I spotted him immediately. Michael sat at a corner table, angled to watch both the door and street, a posture that spoke of habitual vigilance. He stood when our eyes met, uncertainty flickering across his face. Up close, the resemblance to Jake was stronger yet somehow more distant, like looking at what Jake might have become in a kinder universe. "Emma," he said, offering a hand rather than a hug. "You look nothing like the wedding photo they keep on the mantle." "They still have our wedding photo displayed?" I couldn't hide my surprise. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Barbara points to it whenever she mentions you. Usually while saying something like, 'She was the best Jake could do.'" The casual cruelty shouldn't have shocked me anymore, but it still stung. "You visit them?" "Christmas, every 3 years. Michael gestured toward the chair opposite him. "Enough for appearances, not enough for genuine connection. They accept it because acknowledging my complete absence would raise questions in their social circle." I sat, ordering coffee when the waitress approached. Michael waited until she left before leaning forward. "So, what disaster prompted this meeting?" Jake finally showed his true colors. The directness caught me off guard. I'd planned to ease into the conversation, but Michael's bluntness demanded equal honesty. "He's planning to humiliate me at our anniversary dinner next weekend. Public toast to being free, followed by a t-shirt proclaiming our marriage a disappointment." I kept my voice steady. "I found out he's been moving money out of our accounts. Your mother helped plan the whole thing." Michael's expression didn't change, but something hardened behind his eyes. "Sounds about right. Dramatic public scenes are Barbara's specialty." He studied me. "Most people would just file for divorce and leave. I tried the keep the peace approach for 6 years. It didn't work." I met his gaze directly. "Now I want to understand what I'm really dealing with." For the next hour, Michael painted a picture of the family I thought I'd married into. Richard Collins had built his financial services firm through connections rather than ethics, cutting corners and leveraging secrets he knew about influential people. Barbara, with her society connections, provided access to wealthy clients while carefully crafting the family's respectable image. My first mistake was being too good at math, Michael explained, a bitter smile playing at his lips. I joined the firm after college, part of Dad's grand plan. 3 months in, I noticed discrepancies in certain client accounts. Small percentages skimmed systematically over years. When he confronted his father, Richard offered justifications about management fees clients had verbally approved. When Michael pushed back, threatening to report the irregularities, the family response was swift and absolute. They gave me a choice: fall in line or be erased. Michael's voice remained even, but his knuckles whitened around his coffee cup. I chose erasure. Left town that night with what I could pack in my car. By morning, my bank accounts were frozen, my credit cards canceled, and my name removed from the company website. And Jake? I asked softly. Jake called once about a week later. Said he wanted to understand my side. Pain flashed across Michael's face. Then I heard Dad's voice in the background asking who he was talking to. Jake said no one, and hung up. That was 12 years ago. The casual betrayal felt familiar, echoing Jake's treatment of me. He never mentioned having a brother. Not once in 6 years. Michael nodded as if this confirmed something. Jake was always desperate for their approval. I was the heir, he was the spare, until I wasn't, and he got everything he ever wanted. Including their full attention, which is both a gift and a curse. They controlled everything, I murmured, remembering Mrs. Porter's words. Even who he married. Especially that. Michael's gaze softened with something like sympathy. Let me guess, they introduced you? Barbara probably mentioned how perfect you'd be for Jake within 5 minutes of meeting you. The accuracy sent a chill through me. We'd met at a charity gala Barbara had insisted Jake attend. She'd called me refreshingly unpretentious when Jake introduced us. What I'd taken as a compliment now revealed as calculation. They wanted someone they could control, I realized aloud. Someone grateful to be included in their world who wouldn't ask too many questions. And when you eventually did, the countdown to replacement began. I felt sick. They never saw me as family. I was always temporary. We moved to a small park after the cafe, continuing our conversation on a bench overlooking a pond. The afternoon light softened as Michael shared more about the family dynamics I'd married into. With each story, the pieces of my shattered life seemed to realign into a new pattern. One where I wasn't the failure but the inevitable casualty of a toxic system. I have something you should see, Michael said eventually, retrieving a folder from his messenger bag. After I left, I took certain precautions. Insurance, if you will. The folder contained copies of original partnership documents for Collins Financial. According to the paperwork, the firm had been founded by Richard and his father as equal partners. Upon the grandfather's death, the ownership was meant to be split between Richard and his sons. Dad had the documents rewritten after I left, Michael explained. These are the originals. By law, I still own 25% of the company, and eventually, you and Jake would inherit another 25 upon Richard's death. I stared at the papers, understanding dawning. He cut you out completely. And Jake either doesn't know or doesn't care. Michael's voice held no bitterness, just resignation. I've never pursued it. Starting over felt cleaner than fighting for a place in a family that didn't want me. The sun was setting when we finally parted, exchanging phone numbers with a promise to stay in touch. Something had sparked between us. A connection born of shared wounds and understanding. In Michael's eyes, I saw recognition of the person I truly was, not the convenient placeholder his family had designated me to be. Our meetings became regular over the following weeks. We were careful at first, meeting in out-of-the-way places where Jake's friends wouldn't see us. I told Jake I'd joined a book club to explain my absences, a lie he accepted without interest. Michael showed me how to protect myself financially, helping me secure my remaining assets. I shared details of the upcoming anniversary ambush, watching his expression darken with each new revelation. The attraction that grew between us wasn't planned. It began with simple things, his hand steadying my elbow, our fingers brushing when passing coffee, lingering eye contact that made my heart race. After years of Jake's coldness, Michael's attentiveness felt like stepping into sunlight after a long winter. The night everything changed, we'd been reviewing financial documents in Michael's apartment. A spring storm raged outside, rain lashing against the windows. When I stood to leave, Michael caught my hand. "Stay," he said simply. "It's not safe to drive in this." I stayed. What happened between us that night wasn't revenge or rebound. It was recognition. Two people who had been damaged by the same family finding comfort and understanding in each other's arms. 6 weeks later, the pregnancy test showed positive. I sat on my bathroom floor, staring at the little pink line with a mixture of terror and wonder. Jake and I hadn't been intimate in months. There was no question who the father was. I called Michael immediately. His voice was steady when I told him, asking what I wanted to do. Not telling me, not assuming, asking. In that moment I knew. This child, created between two people the Collins family had rejected, would be the greatest evidence of their failure. Not just a baby but a new beginning. And suddenly I knew exactly what my announcement at the anniversary dinner would be. The pregnancy test changed everything. What had begun as a defensive strategy to protect myself from humiliation evolved into something far more significant. This wasn't just about avoiding Jake's trap anymore. It was about creating a future free from the Collins family's toxic influence. Looking at that positive test, I felt strangely calm. The path forward suddenly appeared with perfect clarity. "We need to act quickly," Michael said when we met the next day, his hand protectively covering mine. "The anniversary dinner is less than 3 weeks away." I nodded, squeezing his fingers. "I've made a list. First priority is securing assets." My meeting with Sarah Reeves, the divorce attorney, had prepared me well. She'd outlined the steps to legally protect myself without crossing into improper behavior that could backfire in court. The following morning, I scheduled an appointment with Vanessa Chin, the financial advisor Sarah had recommended. "Your situation isn't uncommon," Vanessa assured me, reviewing our financial statements. "Spouses planning to leave often move assets gradually, hoping to avoid detection." She helped me document Jake's systematic withdrawal of funds, creating a paper trail that would support my claims in the divorce. Then we discussed what I could legally secure. "Your inheritance from your grandmother is separate property," she explained. "The funds in your personal account are safe. For joint assets, you're entitled to your fair share." With her guidance, I transferred exactly half of our remaining joint savings into my new secure account. The transaction would be visible to Jake, but as Vanessa pointed out, it's completely legal. If he questions it, simply say you're diversifying investments. The house presented a more complicated challenge. As Jake had often reminded me, his parents had helped with the down payment. A gift that came with invisible strings attached. The deed, however, listed both our names. When Jake mentioned an overnight business trip to Philadelphia, I recognized my opportunity. His regular business trips had become more frequent lately, and a quick check of his burner phone confirmed my suspicions. He'd be meeting Diane at a downtown hotel. The moment his car pulled away from our driveway, I called Malcolm Reed, a real estate agent known for quick, discreet sales. Within hours, he was walking through our home. "The market is hot right now," Malcolm noted, making notes on his tablet. "Your location and the recent kitchen remodel put you in an excellent position. We could list significantly above what you paid 4 years ago." "I don't want to list it yet," I clarified. "I need to understand the process and timeline. My husband and I are." I paused, choosing my words carefully, considering our options. Malcolm's expression told me he understood the subtext. "I've handled many divorces, Mrs. Collins. If you decide to sell, I can move quickly. The paperwork requires both signatures, but everything else can be prepared in advance." I thanked him, taking the detailed market analysis he prepared. The potential sale price was higher than I'd expected, enough to secure a fresh start even after splitting the proceeds with Jake. That evening, Michael and I reviewed our progress over dinner at his apartment. "The financial pieces are falling into place," I reported, showing him Vanessa's recommendations and Malcolm's analysis. Michael nodded, pulling out a leather portfolio. "I've been building our case regarding Collins Financial." He spread several documents across the table. "I met with my attorney yesterday. These partnership agreements are legally binding. My father had no right to remove my stake in the company. He'd compiled years of financial records, board meeting minutes and correspondence. Together, they painted a damning picture of how Richard Collins had systematically erased his elder son from the family business. According to my attorney, I have grounds for a substantial lawsuit. Michael's voice remained calm, but his eyes betrayed his hurt. Not just for my share of the company, but for years of lost dividends and growth. I studied the documents, recognizing the opportunity they presented. You never pursued this before. Why now? His gaze met mine, intensity burning in those kind eyes that had become so dear to me. Before it was just about money. Now, his hand gently touched my stomach. Now it's about legacy. About making things right for more than just myself. Our planning continued into the following week. While Jake attended client meetings and secret rendezvous with Diane, I systematically prepared for my departure from a marriage that had become nothing but a facade. I sorted through personal belongings, quietly removing family heirlooms and irreplaceable photographs from our home, storing them in a small rental unit Michael helped secure. I forwarded important mail to a new P.O. box and changed my personal passwords on every account. The most critical ally in our plan emerged when I reached out to Megan, the waitress who had first warned me about Jake's scheme. We met at a park far from both Vincenzo's and the cafe where she normally worked. Her expression was concerned as I outlined what I'd discovered since our last conversation. "They're horrible people," she murmured, shaking her head. "What will you do at the dinner?" I shared the broad strokes of my plan, watching her eyes widen. "I need someone on the inside," I explained. "Someone who can help ensure the timing works perfectly." Megan hesitated only briefly before nodding. "I'm scheduled to work that night anyway. What do you need from me?" We spent an hour reviewing the layout of Vincenzo's, confirming the table location Barbara had reserved, and planning the exact timing for Michael's entrance. Megan would ensure he remained unseen until my signal, positioning him perfectly for maximum impact. "Practice your speech on me," she suggested when we'd finalized the logistics. "You'll want to get the wording just right." I stood, smoothing my dress nervously, and began rehearsing the words I'd crafted for my public response to Jake's toast. Megan listened intently, offering suggestions to sharpen certain phrases and emphasize key points. "That pause after you mention the pregnancy, hold it longer," she advised. "Let it sink in before you introduce Michael. And make sure to look directly at Barbara when you reveal the documents about the company." We practiced until the words flowed naturally, my voice growing stronger with each rehearsal. By our third run-through, even I was convinced by my performance. "You're going to destroy them," Megan said with quiet satisfaction. "And they deserve every bit of it." The final piece of our plan came together when Michael's attorney confirmed the paperwork was ready. The legal documents asserting his claim to Collins Financial had been professionally prepared, copies made for each family member present at the dinner. Nothing would be officially filed until after our announcement, a courtesy Michael insisted on despite everything his family had done. "I want to see their faces when they realize what's happening," he admitted. "Is that petty of me? After what they've done to both of us?" I squeezed his hand. "I'd call it human." The night before the anniversary dinner, I stood in our bedroom, looking at the dress I'd chosen for the occasion. A deep blue sheath that projected confidence and control, not the burgundy Barbara had pressured me to wear for family events. Jake was working late again, giving me time for final preparations. I packed a small overnight bag with essentials and placed it in my car trunk. All important documents were secured in Michael's apartment, along with the items I truly cared about. Whatever happened tomorrow night, I wouldn't be returning to this house that had never really felt like home. Michael called as I was finishing my preparations. "Are you ready for tomorrow?" His voice held both concern and determination. "As ready as I'll ever be," I answered honestly. "Scared but certain. Remember, whatever happens, we're in this together now." The warmth in his voice steadied me. One way or another, after tomorrow night, they can't hurt either of us again. I thought about the child growing inside me. A new Collins who would never know the manipulation and cruelty of Richard and Barbara, who would be raised with love instead of control. Whatever came next wouldn't be easy, but it would be real. "Tomorrow then," I said softly. "The beginning of the rest." As I hung up, I heard Jake's key in the front door. Taking a deep breath, I prepared to play the unsuspecting wife one final time. Soon, very soon, the masks would come off for good. The day of our anniversary dawned bright and clear. A perfect May Saturday that offered no hint of the storm about to break. Jake had been unusually attentive that morning, bringing me coffee in bed, a gesture so out of character it only confirmed what I already knew. His smile didn't reach his eyes as he reminded me of our dinner reservation. 7 o'clock Vincenzo's, he said, straightening his golf shirt. Mom and Dad are looking forward to celebrating with us. I wouldn't miss it for the world, I replied, matching his false enthusiasm with my own. He left for his pre-anniversary golf game with his father, giving me the day to make final preparations. Michael and I spoke briefly by phone, confirming he understood the timing. Megan texted that she was scheduled for our section of the restaurant. Everything was aligned. At 6:30 I stood before the mirror in our bedroom, smoothing the fabric of my blue dress. My hands trembled slightly as I fastened my grandmother's pearl earrings, the only family heirloom I truly valued. The woman staring back at me looked calm, composed, even beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with makeup or clothing. It was the serenity of absolute certainty. Jake was waiting downstairs, dressed in the charcoal suit I'd once told him was my favorite. Another calculated detail in his performance. "You look nice," he said, his tone suggesting mild surprise. "Thank you. It's a special occasion after all." I smiled, picking up my purse. Inside was everything I needed for tonight. Copies of the financial records, the partnership documents, and a small velvet box Michael had given me yesterday. The drive to Vincenzo's passed in silence, broken only by Jake's occasional comment about traffic or weather. I noticed his knuckles whitening on the steering wheel as we approached the restaurant, his only visible sign of anticipation. Richard and Barbara were already seated at the corner table when we arrived, exactly as Megan had predicted. Barbara wore an expensive burgundy dress, the Collins family color, and a smile that didn't warm her calculating eyes. Richard stood to greet us, his handshake firm and impersonal as always. 6 years, Barbara mused as we settled into our seats. It hardly seems possible. Time flies, I agreed pleasantly. So much has happened since the wedding. Jake signaled for champagne immediately, his knee bouncing nervously under the table. I caught Megan's eye as she approached with menus, her subtle nod confirming everything was set. The first course arrived in a haze of forced conversation. Barbara dominated the table with stories about their recent country club events, while Richard occasionally interjected with comments about the market. Jake kept checking his watch, his attention clearly fixed on some predetermined moment. "Do you remember our wedding toast, Jake?" I asked innocently during a lull. "Your father said something about how marriage was the foundation of legacy." Richard's chest puffed slightly at the mention. "Family is everything. The Collins name stands for something in this town." "Indeed it does," I murmured, thinking of all I'd learned about what exactly that name stood for. The main course had just been cleared when Jake finally set his plan in motion. He glanced at his father, receiving a slight nod, then tapped his knife against his champagne flute. The sharp ding drew attention from nearby tables, exactly as they'd intended. "I'd like to make a toast," Jake announced, his voice carrying through the restaurant's hushed atmosphere. He stood, glass raised, eyes gleaming with malicious triumph. "To 6 years of marriage." He paused, looking down at me with a smirk. "And to being free, single, and searching." The words hung in the air like poison. Several diners turned to stare, exactly as Barbara had planned with her strategic table selection. Jake reached under his chair and produced a gift box, placing it before me with theatrical flair. "A little anniversary present," he said loudly. "Custom made." Barbara leaned forward eagerly as I opened the box with steady hands. The black t-shirt with its white lettering, 6 years of disappointment, lay folded inside. Richard smirked while Barbara actually chuckled, her eyes darting to nearby tables to ensure they were watching my humiliation. In that moment, with the weight of their cruelty pressing down on me, a strange calm settled over my entire being. This pathetic display, this childish attempt to break me, it suddenly seemed so small compared to the life growing inside me and the future I was about to claim. I stood, smiling genuinely for the first time that evening. The unexpectedness of my reaction caused Jake's smirk to falter. "Thank you for the gift, Jake," I said, my voice clear and steady. "It's actually perfect timing. I've been wanting to make an announcement of my own tonight." Confusion flickered across all three Collins' faces. This wasn't in their script. First, I want to thank you all for showing me exactly who you are. I lifted my water glass in a mocking toast. For 6 years I tried to be part of this family, never understanding why I always fell short. Tonight's performance finally makes everything crystal clear. Jake's expression morphed from confusion to anger. Sit down, Emma. You're embarrassing yourself. No, Jake. For once, I'm not the one who should be embarrassed. I turned to include the entire table in my gaze. Did you know your son has been systematically moving funds from our joint accounts for months? Preparing for this moment while playing the devoted husband. Barbara's face hardened. This is hardly appropriate dinner conversation. I agree, I interrupted smoothly. Neither is publicly humiliating your daughter-in-law. But since we've abandoned propriety, let's continue with complete honesty. I reached into my purse, withdrawing the first document. I've already secured my half of our assets, including the proceeds from our house, which sold yesterday for significantly above asking price. I smiled at their shocked expressions. Turns out the market is excellent right now. Jake's face flushed crimson. You can't sell our house without my signature. You signed the listing agreement 3 weeks ago, I replied calmly. Remember that stack of work documents you initialed without reading? You really should be more careful with paperwork. Richard started to rise, but I held up my hand. I'm not finished. There's someone else who deserves to hear this. I looked toward the entrance and nodded. Michael appeared from where he'd been waiting, walking confidently toward our table. The resemblance between the brothers was unmistakable, causing several nearby diners to stare in confusion. Michael, Barbara whispered, her face draining of color. He stopped beside me, placing a supportive hand at the small of my back. Hello, Mother. That little brother. It's been a while. The stunned silence that fell over the table was deeply satisfying. Richard recovered first, his voice a harsh whisper. What is the meaning of this? Family reunion, I answered. Long overdue, wouldn't you say? Jake stared at his brother, then at me, comprehension slowly dawning. You and him, you've been getting to know each other, I finished. Comparing notes on the Collins family dynamics. It's been quite illuminating. Michael placed a folder on the table. These are copies of the original partnership agreements for Collins Financial. As you can see, I still legally own 25% of the company, despite Father's creative accounting suggesting otherwise. Richard's face contorted with rage. You have no proof. We have every proof, Michael countered calmly. Bank records, original documents, witness statements. My attorney has prepared everything for filing first thing Monday morning. I placed my hand protectively over my still flat stomach, delivering the final blow. And one more announcement before we go. I'm pregnant. The words hung in the air as I let them absorb the implication. Michael and I are expecting a child. A Collins heir who will never know the manipulation and cruelty you three consider love. The restaurant had fallen completely silent. At nearby tables, diners sat frozen, forks suspended midway to mouths, all pretense of not listening abandoned. Barbara found her voice first, hissing, You planned this entire charade to humiliate us. No, Barbara. You planned a charade to humiliate me. I simply refused to play the victim. I picked up the t-shirt from its box. You should keep this. It suits your family better than it does me. I placed the shirt in front of her, then reached for Michael's hand. Goodbye, Jake. I'll have my lawyer contact you regarding the divorce. As we walked away, I heard the crash of Richard's fist hitting the table, Barbara's harsh whisper to control yourself, and Jake's stunned silence. We passed Megan, who gave me a subtle thumbs up from behind her serving tray. Outside, the evening air felt clean and new against my skin. Michael squeezed my hand as we walked toward his car. Are you okay? He asked softly. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of 6 years lifting from my shoulders. Behind us, the restaurant door banged open as Jake stormed out, stopping short when he saw us together. This isn't over, he called, his voice breaking slightly. I turned back one last time, meeting his gaze steadily. You're right about one thing, Jake. I am free now. I smiled, genuine and unforced. And that's worth celebrating. Hand in hand with Michael, I walked away from the Collins family and their toxic legacy, toward something real, something honest, something that finally felt like home.